Good morning. All right, you all awake out there? All right, I hope you've had your coffee. It's bright and early. Come on, we're on East Coast time. All right, by now, as you know, we process 160 million transactions an hour, so we're going at MasterCard. And we're going to be going here and talking a little bit about the economy. First, a show of hands, and you're right, Terry, you can't see up here. How many people think the economy's getting better? How many think it's getting worse? How many people aren't awake? All right, come on. All right, so it is interesting. Basically what we do, just so you understand, I'm so fortunate. I have a team of 2,000 data scientists behind me, and we take the 160 million transactions we see an hour, and we add 1.5 million rules and algorithms to bring it up to total retail spend, including cash and check. So everything you see here will be the total spend in terms of the categories, sectors, and in the United States. So we're going to go through and I'm going to talk about things and really give you an idea of where we're spending and where we're not. Because the key that I want you to think about is what sort of analytics do I need to look at to improve my business, to reach my consumer? Because the difference of before the recession, right, which really was the Depression, it really mirrored 1928, all right, what the difference is, before it, you could have that consumer do anything. She bought anything. And by the way, it is a she. 75% of transactions are still done by women, and you know we influence the other 25%. All right, so from that perspective, she would buy anything. But post the recession, you have to pull her in. She shops at half the number of stores she shopped at before, and she's extremely focused. So, all right, let's see if I can get this clicker working, and we'll go. Lawyers, done. All right. So, very interesting to understand, this is the total retail spend in the economy without auto sales in it. But I don't want you to look at it this way. Look at it this way. Because what did I just do? I took out gasoline spending, which is 12% of total retail spending. And you can see that we actually have very steady growth. So all of you who didn't raise your hand to say the economy is improving are really not correct. All right? Because the fact is you don't see this type of growth, and it's 70% of GDP in this country. So if you don't see this type of growth, we'd have to be going down, down, and negative if there was a problem. Now, there are a couple things I want to point out to you. Look at August 2015. Any idea why we dipped? We are not Europe and on vacation, so that is not the reason. The reason is that there was one less Saturday in the month. So what does it mean to you as a retailer? It means you must think about the hours that you are open for your consumer to come shopping with you. And that is critical because you have two people in a family working post the recession, and that is not going to change. They are too scared to have just one person working because of what happened before. And so from that perspective, you need to accommodate their hours. I recently moved to Florida, and I was looking to buy some new furniture, and none of the furniture stores in Florida opened before 12 o'clock on a Sunday. Well, I fly out every Sunday to do whatever meeting I'm going to have, and so that's not really good for me in my hours, all right? And that's the key thing to understand. And by the way, when I did queue up at noon when it opened, there was a bunch of other people with me. So the point is that retailer is missing business that could be there when we could shop at our leisure, and probably we would buy more. And that's what I want to be thinking about. Second thing, weather does matter a little bit. You can see that Winter Storm Jonas, when it went across the country, did have an impact in January. The first 2 weeks of January were actually extremely strong, and we saw that real holdback. Now, I do have to make a bit of a funny at our friends in Washington. You know, with a half an inch of snow, they can't even drive and get to work on time, so can you imagine what 20 inches did, right? So from their perspective, they didn't go to work, shop, or anything. But look at the nice rebound. Now, we did have an extra day in February because of leap year. But then you still see that the spending in March was very strong. But one of the most interesting things is the next slide, which is this. All right? We have a real challenge in the country, all right? And the challenge in the country is that we have been very reliant on people wanting to come visit here and shop over the last number of years. Now, my nickname on Wall Street was Duchess of Doom. That's because I like to short. But this is the doomy part of the discussion. So my apologies to everybody. I promise it will get better. This is what is happening to international tourism spend in the United States. All right, so look from 2012, we're out of the recession, we're recovering, but look at the fact that you could see that the Chinese were spending dramatically, that we saw good spend from Canada, from the UK, from Brazil, and now look what's happened in 2015, and look what's happened year to date. Now, there's two factors here that are extremely important. We have a strong dollar, which is not going to be going away anytime soon. We are by far the strongest growing economy in the world. And so from that perspective, currency rates, I've traded them for 30 years. They are relative and they will stay this way. The second thing that's going on is we do have a slowing economy in most of the world. And so from that perspective, they are traveling less and spending less. That being said, obviously this is what I'm talking about in the currencies. When you see it's 110% that the dollar has strengthened against the Brazilian real. That is extremely impactful to all of the South, all right, and especially to the Miami area. So it's been very much what we've seen this change in spending. So when you see what the spending here is that we saw that Brazilian and Chinese tourists in the United States really were focusing here. German and British visitors actually came to play, all right? But what was interesting is that we've seen this really shift now, and we can even see when the Brazilians and the Chinese are coming, they're actually doing the same sort of thing, dining out much more, visiting our entertainment sites, and not as much shopping. And then we go down to department stores, for example, all right? And we can see here that one of the things that's interesting is our friends at the UK love department stores. And in fact, that is the #1 growth category in their country and spending all the time. So sitting here and appreciating, and this is what I talk about in how you use the data. So it's what I'm saying is not nice for you to have, it's need for you to have. Because what does it mean? It means you can then segment your customers, go in and directly reach and provide offers to the different people that you know are more likely to shop. Marketing is an expense. So you want to make certain that it's targeted and you get that return on investment. And this is how you do that, by understanding who actually is coming to your stores. And then, we look at U.S. department stores in terms of the tourist spend. And obviously you can see the interesting thing is that we still got the UK coming, right? But the interesting thing, it shouldn't surprise you that it's also the second strongest economy in the world in terms of retail spending right now. All right, I'm done with the negative, okay? It was hopefully not too painful. All right, moving on. So where are we actually spending, all right? Well, this is it. So this is the next challenge for larger retailers in this country, is we are shopping small. So we have, in this side, this actually is February, I just came out yesterday with the data for March. So it's actually 48 months in a row now where we have seen the growth in small business spending, that's businesses with 50 million or less in total retail sales, actually outgrowing total retail sales. So there's two very important learnings from this. The first is, it's not about the discount. Because if you go to a smaller retailer who only has 50 million or less in retail sales, they can't go buy volume discounts, right? That's not their thing. What they are providing is a unique experience, and the U.S. consumer is saying an overwhelming yes to this experience. And that is extremely critical to understand. So it doesn't mean everybody should all of a sudden sell off every division they have in their company. What it means is you have got to create a much more personalized experience within the store for your consumer, and really realize who wants this, who wants that, what colors matter to certain people, those types of things in terms of really creating an experience when you go in there. All right, and then the other thing is the gas savings. So one of the things that everybody should realize is we are still down 29% in the price of gasoline from what we were before it started falling 18 months ago. This is a benefit. We are seeing everyone spending around 72% of what they have saved. So that money is going into the economy. It's not all going to goods. That's the thing you have to appreciate. Part of it's going to be spent on experiences. But clearly the interesting thing that's very important here is to understand that the young people, the millennials, now everybody knows who's heard me before, I throw my beautiful 24-year-old cost center under the bus all the time, all right? That's a child, by the way. Yeah, but the interesting thing is they really are working now. And they're moving out, and they're paying rent, and so is mine. It is glorious. But the thing to understand about that is this is a real benefit for them, because we have taken advantage as employers of not having to pay them as much. There hasn't been until fourth quarter of last year pressure on wages. So we haven't really had to pay them. So any sort of gas savings like this has really benefited the younger people, Gen X and below, so they've actually had more money to spend in the economy. And this is where they're spending it. So one of the things that's most interesting is we've seen lodging do exceptionally well. And note that brown line. There was only 1 month that they've had to discount to actually fill hotel rooms, all right? And all of you know who travel anywhere that it costs more and more and more. And people are taking 3 and 4 and 5 day vacations. Now, we are guilty of causing this at MasterCard. We ran our One More Day campaign because 432 million vacation days were not used in this country last year. And we told everyone to go on vacation. They listened. And the good news of that is that people actually like their family and friends again, which is good. All right? And so the key thing to understand is, though, we are spending on this. So what should you do? Well, if you're a retailer, you better tie in and partner with these guys and make that part of the overall travel experience. Because why? Because I told you 2 people are working all the time. So when they go on vacation, guess what they do? They go shopping. And they go to the very stores that they could go to in their hometown, and they go there, because we see this, remember, I see this, right? And that's the most interesting thing. So they go where they're familiar because they don't have the time to shop on a regular basis, right? And I think that this is the most interesting trend that we're seeing post-recession, is this destination shopping. And that's why I think it's critical to take advantage of knowing who's going here to these and traveling, because then you can actually curate an entire experience for them. The other thing we're not buying a lot of is apparel, all right? Now, but we finally started to buy in the last 4 months. Now, the interesting thing is, look at the fact that we didn't buy over Black Friday. So we waited and waited and waited. Now, Terry referenced the fact it was 72 degrees on Christmas Day. It was amazing. All right, my family and I were building gingerbread houses outside. Never thought I'd see that. But what was fascinating about that is that it obviously delayed patterns. And this is the key thing of understanding how can we start to think about potentially flexing our inventory a bit, more just in time, like the car manufacturers did 20 years ago. But notice here that the concern I do have in apparel is the fact that it's slightly declining as the discounts get reduced. That brown line represents the discounting we're seeing. So there has been a real selling of clothes, but at expense of margins, which is not healthy. But who's driving it? Well, yay, millennials. They're back. I told you they'd get clothes eventually, right? Maybe not the ones you expect, yoga pants every day, we get it. But the point is to understand is that we are seeing them absolutely spending on this. But the Gen Xers are here, and that we forget them a lot of times. We talk about the baby boomers, my generation being the richest and all that. But the Gen Xers have kids, and they're spending. And we see the growth here. Because the fact is, do not forget, today it was announced at 8:30 this morning Eastern Time that the lowest in 53 years in terms of continuing claims for unemployment. If you want a job now in this country, you can get a job. And that's the key thing to appreciate, is people are back working, and we just need to go find them and tell them we love them and bring them back to our stores. Footwear very much mirrors apparel, but notice less discounting. A key thing to understand, footwear allows you to differentiate an outfit, and that's a key thing. So it actually more leads into the dress now as opposed to the other way around. It's very interesting to see that spending. But this is the other place we are really investing in. So 2 years ago, if I had shown you this chart, you wouldn't have seen the growth rate. But if I had separated out furniture from furnishings, you would have seen we were buying the throw pillow, the furnishings. But now we're buying the furniture. This is the key thing to understand. The average ticket has gone up and up and up. And the key thing that we're doing is we're not moving and buying new homes, all right? This is the key thing to understand. The housing recovery is basically over. New home sales are actually down 6% year on year. So we've actually seen that we sort of reached the peak of affordability there. But people are investing in their existing space. But make no bones about it, we are living closer to where we work. Now, a lot of people have talked about it being urbanization. It's not urbanization. It's finding out where, like, we're in the suburbs, but people move closer to purchase New York because they want to be closer and not have as big a commute. This is, again, the time factor I was talking about. So that means that we need to rethink a little bit in furniture what we're actually bringing into the store, because we're not living in McMansions. We're living in smaller homes, so therefore we need smaller sofas, smaller dining room tables, things like that. So thinking about some of those merchandising decisions is what the data is telling you, and appreciating where people are. And again, the other thing that was amazing is millennials are actually buying furniture. That's how I knew we kicked them out, all right? And so, It was great to see, and we could actually see them actually starting to invest in this space, which is really pretty great. And understand, look, it's been a challenge. Where are the students in the back? Raise your hands. All right. You guys, I love you. You guys are fabulous. All right? So understand, you got to buy some furniture. You cannot live at home. All right? I just want to be clear, because Terry gave you a job. Enough. All right? But the issue to understand here is this is where we can follow the patterns and anticipate and see the change when we start to see people work. Because remember, the change post this recession is you don't spend if you don't have a job. We don't see people building up ridiculous credit card balances anymore. That's 2006 behavior. So you really can see the improvement here. All right, again, Gen X leading here makes some sense. They've got kids now. They don't want them to sleep on the floor. It's good. All right. And then millennials, I just wanted to show you, because I did, I don't just take my word for it. The data doesn't lie. And again, we can really, that's the cool thing. We can break this down and really understand patterns of who's buying and what. What's depressing to me is this slide. Now, I do not consider jewelry discretionary. They keep making me put it in the discretionary category. It's mandatory in my life. All right, and what's disappointing here is we've seen a huge drop-off in spending in fine jewelry here. And that, frankly, is the stronger dollar. That is also the fact that there's been huge volatility in the stock market. And it 100% correlates with stability there. So what we are doing is, interestingly, not seeing great spending in costume jewelry either. We're seeing in that mid category is where we're actually seeing the growth in jewelry. But there has been discounting to move. And I will tell you, Valentine's Day was disappointing, and shame on you, gentlemen. All right? So, as I said, mid-tier jewelry is where we actually see the growth. So you can see on a consistent basis that it's been steady growth. But look, see, Valentine's Day, depressing, guys. All right? And then the interesting thing is, one of the things that we've waited to see household formation. And so people are getting married. So finally, we actually see some jewelry spending on that. Very interesting. People never thought that would happen either. All right, now, I'm a little doomy again. Where are we not spending, all right? So to understand, so the key thing is, it's not to say all of a sudden I sell this and that wasn't in my category of what we're actually buying. What I want you to understand is how can you take from the experience of how they're selling and adapt it to what you actually are selling? And that's how you use the data here. All right, so I wasn't joking about the high-tier jewelry. You can see it's just dropped and dropped and dropped. And that has really been consistent with the foreign tourists dropping, as well as with this volatility, as I was saying, in the high end. Fine dining has been really poor. All right, and one of the interesting things is if you think about it, we've really watched, if I look at commercial cards and I look at business spending, fine dining has really dropped off in that space. But in general, the key thing is we're all about the experience in dining out. We're not about spending a ridiculous amount of money for it anymore. And again, our behavior really changed in 2008. It's thinking about a value for money experience, which is much more what people want. So in other words, they'll spend much more in that. Their casual dining is growing very, very strongly. So that's the category below. So it's an interesting sort of evolution of watching what's happening. Luxury, not doing well. Now, understand, this is an interesting thing, because if we measure by the wealth effect, and the wealth effect is real estate prices plus the value of the stock market, and we actually are back to pre-2008 levels, but we do not see a resumption of the spending here. Now, obviously, one of the big drivers here is, as I say, this drop in tourism spending has had a huge impact here. But these numbers are very concerning, because look at the discounting going on to try to drive the minimum amount of sales. Now, as everyone knows, we had an early Easter this year, and the sales, as you can see there, did not really drive significant traffic in the space, and again, at the expense of margins. Department stores also being very challenged as a sector, and understanding that clearly there's been periods where they're coming back, but clearly, the things that Terry's talking about are very cool, because that's what hasn't been going on. And that's what's been going on in the specialty retailers that has been pulling shoppers from department stores. And what he's doing to pull people back in is exactly what needs to be done, creating different and unique experiences within the store. And that's what actually has to happen. But, the big thing is going to be the education of people for them to understand this. And really appreciating when you realize this understanding of how difficult things are around the world, I want you to understand. So, for example, if I look at the United States, you saw steady growth. If I look at United Kingdom, I see steady growth, but it has slowed the last 3 months. They are very concerned, the UK consumer, about leaving the European Union. All right, it's 50-50 right now whether they will or they won't. I don't think they will, but I can tell you it's a huge concern because 60% of their exports go to the European Union. If you think the European Union is going to keep the rules the same, they won't. But so what's happened is the consumer has pulled back and back and back, and that has been a huge challenge for them. But they still, one good news is that they are actually increasing their travel, and they're increasing their travel to the United States, which will benefit us. All right? Secondly, though, if I look at Brazil, Brazil had no lift over Carnival, no lift as we would normally see during that period. And in fact, they have stagflation down there, which means that they have no growth. They're actually in recession, but they have inflation, which they've announced at 9%. We're measuring more like at 25. All right? And so understand that this is a real challenge, and that has spread throughout all of South America. All right, and then let's go over to China, all right, and really understand that Lunar New Year is their Christmas. And I saw, spending drop 10.4% in Hong Kong over that period. And that was all, it was interesting. It was not just the domestic Hong Kong consumer, but that was all the people coming into mainland China, into Hong Kong. And you say, well, Sarah, they're going somewhere else. Well, let's take Japan. They went to Japan, but their ticket was 10% less. So we could actually see the drop there of what's going on. And obviously, they're still restabilizing their economy. So we can see that challenge that's being faced there. So why am I telling you all these depressing things, all right? Not because I'm doom, but I'm telling you this because I want you to focus and be much more upbeat about the American consumer, because she is doing better. She does have money, but what is she spending on, all right? The other thing I didn't show you she's spending on restaurants. We are now in the United States, between our food spend, 48% on restaurants and 52% in grocery. Think about what that means. And by the way, the millennials are already 52-48 restaurants to grocery. Now, I knew that's where I failed. I didn't teach her to cook, all right? But the reality here to understand this is to appreciate that is going to change and continue to evolve. That pattern won't all of a sudden because they have kids, because the older millennials have kids and they don't cook. All right? So understanding this whole experiential economy is really what we learned from the recession. So to understand how you can fit in and appreciate that, we saw the highest airline spend in Spending Pulse history last year. People flying around the country like there was no tomorrow. We saw the highest spend in restaurants last year we've never seen. The highest spend in lodging. Now, the good news for all of you is that only 40% of Americans have a passport. They can't leave the island. Yay. So when they are traveling around and doing this destination shopping, they're doing it here, right? So what I want you to think about and what we're going to show you is just a couple things that we do to help people really understand how to reach out to that consumer, bring her closer, and make her understand what exactly is going. So the first thing we did is we created what we call, a credit. You know how you have a credit score? Well, we created one for real estate using these 5 factors: growth of spend, the stability of spend, the size of spend, the traffic of spend, and the ticket size. And we take it to every block in the United States. I can take it down that much. And what happens is I can say this block is great for shoes, but this one is better for shoes, right? So in other words, I can actually really measure what that spend is, because one of the things that people forget is that we are creatures of habit, all right? So we don't have midlife crises. We don't change how we spend. Every single one of us has a propensity model of how we spend. And we've aggregated that anonymous behavior into understanding what happens on a block. So think about if you're trying to figure out where your next restaurant should be, where your next store should be, understanding and using this tool so that you don't make a long and lengthy investment mistake. Because remember, you're not just signing a lease, you're also doing the fitting out of the real estate and everything. And it is critical, because one of the things that you need to appreciate, all right, is that we have not moved online as much as you think, all right? So what do you think the percentage of spending in the United States is online? I'm listening. 15, I heard. 10. It is 7.6%. That is it, my friends. All right? And so understand the difference of appreciating that this omni-channel is important, all right? And understand that it is growing. We've seen double-digit growth in online for the last 5 months. But the challenge is we still love our bricks and mortar. So how do you curate that experience? Because we've done research that knows that 75% of Americans do use a mobile device when they shop, but they do it, frankly, while they're in the store. And that's the thing to appreciate, is how do you bring those two experiences into one? And so it's extremely important to understand and curate your website and think about that. Now, 17.3% of department sales are done online right now. 30% of apparel is done online, right? But think about how the growth was only 1% last year of online sales. The more commodity the product, so 57% of electronics are done online. The more commodity-like a product is, the easier it goes online, because we don't have what? If you haven't learned one thing from my talk, it's time, right? So we don't have time for returns. So making certain that that people can buy online, return in store, that the hours are easy, that you pick up from their house, all those types of things is so critical, because again, that will dissuade people from going online and doing the sales. But because what we do see done online is what? The number one growth every single month in online sales is in children's clothing. And yes, it's moms at 10 o'clock at night online buying clothes. And that's exactly, it fits her convenience, it fits her lifestyle. She's gone out to dinner with her family, right? I told you that, all right? And then she comes home, done homework, put the kids to bed, she gets online. So what does it mean? It means you send her offer at 9:30, because she opens her email first and then she shops. That's how you be smart in thinking about what's going on. And with that in mind, I put up Masterpass here. Now, many of you know we're a tech company, and if you don't, you should. And the reason is that we spend our days inventing better technologies. All right, we're in the payment industry, but we're not in the card industry. There's a big difference. So we invented the technology behind Apple Pay and Samsung Pay, and the same technology MDES is sitting here in Masterpass, which is our digital wallet. And this is the way to provide safety and security online. That is the other reason we hear from consumers they don't want to shop online. They are scared about putting their data there and having it hacked. I appreciate that. I've been hacked a lot, right? And so understand, so what this does, and I think a lot of people don't realize what happens. Everyone, who's got a chip card? Everyone hopefully has a chip card now, right? You all got chip cards? If you're not, ask for one. So the key thing to understand about the chip card is, instead of when you swipe, the same 16-digit number goes through the machine. When you use a chip card, the different 16-digit number goes to the cloud. And the same authentication, but the difference is it's much harder for the bad guys to get. And that's the key thing. Masterpass uses the same technology for online, which again puts the authentication in a different place. And again, it's safety and security, because you're choosing just to say, I want to use Masterpass, and not having to put in your numbers. And that's the key thing. We want to continue to move the transaction. As our CEO says, Ajay Banga, he goes, you don't wake up in the morning and say, I'd like to make a transaction today. No, you wake up in the morning and say, I want to meet my daughter for lunch, or I want to, go buy a new dress or whatever. And so the key thing is you don't think about the transaction, and we don't want the consumer to ever have to worry about that. And that's where we're going. And then with that in mind, we created this, which is called digital audiences. And we put these on the different ad exchanges where you do your media buys. And what we've done is we created propensity models to understand there's 2,000 standard audiences there. So if you're raising a specific offer, now for example, I love fine wine. So if there's a wine tasting going on, or a restaurant's hosting a specific event with a fine wine, or they're going to do a tasting at a place I buy dresses or whatever, putting that offer and knowing my name would be in that list, because of the issue of understanding that we've segmented consumers by the propensity of their behavior being a certain way. And that's the key thing. So instead of doing these large, wide-shot emails, you're focusing in, and the difference is we see a difference of a lift between 400% and 600% versus a regular advertising campaign. And then the final thing is, we decided that every individual store needed an easy dashboard. So any individual store can, for $300 a year, subscribe to this and understand your performance, your competitive set, what your customers are doing away from you, because that's the key thing. You know what they're doing with you. Do you know what happens when they leave your store? And so we do this simple so that each manager within a store can, on a simple basis, pull this up, and it's easy, and it doesn't require a PhD to read. Because most people, think about data, and data can, be overwhelming. But data you can use that gives you information that you can action upon that second is really what we're all about. And we think that's priceless. So from that perspective, I'm happy to take a couple of questions. And if not, I'm done and you get coffee. All right? So are there any questions? There's one in the back I see right there. Someone grab her a mic, please. Is there a mic back there? No, I can hear you, but I think, go ahead. It's actually not, all right? And that's the interesting thing. First of all, we love our millennials because they've stayed on our data plans, all right? So I'm not joking about that. So the reality is data plans really haven't gone up, and they've become more affordable because, frankly, this is where competition in our country is the fiercest, right? So we can absolutely see that type of competition. So it has not become an outsized part of the wallet spend. And what has outsized is we continue to see this increase in experiential spending that I was referring to. So what's happened is where someone might have spent, 25% on clothes of their budget in a year, it drops to 20 as they're going up in travel and they're going up in restaurants and the like, or entertainment and concerts and things like that. It's all about building memories. And so the competition is going that way. So it's not a question that, and then I'll anticipate the next question. It's also not in healthcare, which a lot of people are saying it's going to healthcare, and it's not. We don't see that. And you say, well, Sarah, how would you see that? It's part of the analytics. We do look at the entire wallet. And so understanding that that's the big difference. The key thing that we have to appreciate is I'm fairly convinced, because the data has been so long-standing, that these two challenges, meaning the small business challenge, which I mentioned, and the experiential challenge, are here to stay. And so the question of how you adapt and bring your business to meet that, because you can't tell the consumer to change to you. Unfortunately, it really now is the other way, and you have to adapt to the consumer. Who's next? Anybody
Good
else?
morning. I'm Joe Brisuelas, Chief Economist at RSM here in the back. I have a question on your presentation at the outset. That was a fantastic presentation with official statistics. And I'm wondering if your structured and non-structured data suggests that we're actually underestimating the overall spend, especially when it comes to demand for services and some of the new gig economy.
Well, it's interesting. The difference of our methodology is we get every retailer in America, the smallest to the largest, and the government surveys 50,000, of which 30,000 retailers report in. So the difference is that we are capturing, that small business sector. We also are capturing service sector as well. And I absolutely do believe, and you've noticed that they revised up the last number of months, and we correlate, by the way, 100% by the time they do their revisions to the government data. So they're catching up to us in their revisions. And I fully expect the numbers. We were 0.2% higher than them for the month of March with what they released yesterday. I fully expect that number to be revised further up. Because, again, I think it is an issue that the services are out there. And the fact is, it goes back to really what I was saying, the difference of how people just do not spend unless they have a job now. And because we can see this, frankly, almost full employment in the entire country, it is absolutely critical. And we do believe that it is being underreported. Anybody else? Terry?
Hey, Sarah, it's Sean, your intro buddy here. So question for you. We're hearing a lot about how folks are more and more renting, and that the costs of rent are going up, specifically in hot cities like New York and New York City and Boston, San Francisco, Dallas. What is the impact of that on spend, like your ability?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, rents are going up. The difference is what's happening is people aren't moving. That's the difference. We're seeing people stay in the same place, and they're making the decision not to continue to increase their housing costs. And I think that's the most interesting thing. So they say there's sort of a fixed amount. And this is the interesting thing where we see people not moving to the suburbs and to the picket fence once they have children, and choosing, again, to live in smaller quarters because, again, it's the experience of being closer to where they work. And so, but they aren't absolutely choosing to drop down their other spending to say, again, I want to over-inspire. This is really what we taught. We were taught fiscal responsibility, as much as everyone doesn't believe it, by the recession. So we absolutely can see that the consumer is very balanced and has paid down debt very religiously, and that's been an important thing. You know, it took to 2014 before we saw any credit card balances in this country at all. All right, and they are well within healthy limits for everyone and affordable. And as I said, now we've seen 2 consecutive quarters of wages going up. And the interesting thing, and to further say on that, is the states that actually raised the minimum wage at the beginning of the year have had the fastest growth in spending. So the consumer has actually taken that additional money and gone right out, because there is pent-up demand to go out and spend that. So it's really been healthy for the economies where we've actually seen those increases in the minimum wage. But in terms of the housing, people are no longer willing to buy and aspire to the McMansion. They learned that with the 6 million homes that were foreclosed upon in 2008. Terry?
Hi, Sarah. This is MJ Stojak with REI. What percentage of the wallet do you think the experiential spend is, and how much larger do you think it's actually going to get?
You know, it's around 25% right now and growing. And I think it probably gets to, at max, 30. I don't think it gets beyond that, because you do have other costs, in your life that are mandatory and, that you have to have. We do buy clothes occasionally, and things like that. So I think it will not get to beyond that, but it clearly is still growing. The difference will be, and the wild card is still the millennials. Because one of the biggest challenges is we, for example, have gone to casual dressing at work in most of the country now. And at MasterCard, everyone wears jeans every day. So you basically can have one wardrobe that goes right into the weekend. So that drops a fixed cost right there, where people used to have a work wardrobe and a play wardrobe. And that's not necessarily the case anymore. So again, there's sort of that evolution in sort of watching. So some of these things are still a little bit unknown in terms of exactly how much. But to try to get the millennials to dress up is a real challenge. Terry.
So savings rates are at a very high rate. They're about 5% today, and you'd mentioned 2006 through 8 was actually a negative rate at that point in time. But we think 3% is a healthy number. So certainly 5 is. Historically, the American consumer has brought that savings rate down and spent that money, and so there's available spending potential there for lots of households today. Why aren't they spending it, and what is it that's encouraging them to save it the way they are today?
What happened in the recession is we took away the security of people's pensions in their mind. So they feel they have to save more for retirement. And with interest rates basically zero for the past number of years, they haven't made any money in savings. So they've actually over-allocated to savings, thinking about retirement and realizing that there isn't a safety net. It's amazing when it happens when you take iconic companies like GM that go bankrupt and Lehman Brothers, and what it does to the American psyche to think that anybody then can go, all right, from that perspective. And remember, all the banks, frankly, were bailed out. And so from that perspective, what's happened is we've seen people oversave. Now, it's really interesting. The markets are not betting there'll be interest rate increases this year by the Fed. I'm absolutely betting the Fed will go 2 more, all right, because I can absolutely see the pressure and inflation coming into the world now, as well as we obviously are having full employment. So for those 2 things are 2 out of their 3. And we've seen the rest of the world in terms of volatility slow down. I'm not saying the economies are turning so fast, but the volatility has dropped. So from that perspective, the Fed raising will then raise those savings rates, which then will allow people to take some of that savings, because they will see that growth of their savings account, which they're not seeing. They're sitting there going, this is great. I mean, I'm putting all my money here and it's going nowhere. And so that's what's happening. So as that changes and evolves, which I fully expect it will by the end of 2016, I fully expect that money to start coming back into the economy.
Sarah, to your left, over here. So when you were talking about retail tourism, where are we disconnected, the retailers and the tourism industry, in attracting more shoppers. Every year I go to International Powwow. Visit USA brings 1,000 international buyers that do tourism packages. And with exceptions of Macy's and Bloomingdale's and a few retailers, there's no one in the room on the retail space. And I get my Chinese rep saying, we want to come and buy. Where are the stores? So how do we connect more retail and tourism to take advantage of those numbers?
Well, I'll tell you, I get speak and work with tourism agencies around the world who work very hard to bring Americans in and to get them shopping. And I think one of the things that we need to strengthen our tourism boards here, all right, and really do that focused spending. And I'm, for example, working right now with down in Florida because they realize and recognize this challenge of how do you bring people in and how do you really curate the offers, because you're right, they don't know where to go. And so this is the key thing. There's two things you have to do. One, really focus with the tourism boards that exist and really focus. They have money. They're public-private partnerships in many cases, and they have this money for spending. And instead of doing respectfully an ad that just says, come to New York or come to the U.S. or whatever, really creating offers and say, as I say, segmenting down for people is really the key way to actually take this consumer, because I'm not saying that nobody's coming in anymore, but it's very different. And remember, there's only 110 million Chinese that have a passport, right? So you got to focus in on them, right? And understand if they're coming in, you got to get those guys, right? And not the whole country, right? So and that's really understanding exactly who's coming in, where they're spending, what they like to spend on, and what time of day they like to shop. And that's where the analytics really can help. But I would start with the tourism boards, and then I would really start with the partnerships with the airlines and with the hotels, because they're coming. And you just have to then curate with them. We work with a couple of malls in the country, very much on this effort. And we do know when they're coming, because we give them a free suitcase to put all the stuff in to take home. So, yes.
Hey, Sarah. Judy Russell with the Robin Report. Question about the tourism spending. What proportion of retail sales does that represent approximately, and how has that changed over the last few years with the appreciation of the dollar?
Well, it depends on the sector, so it's really hard to say. It was about 50% of luxury spending, so that's why luxury comes down so hard, because, Americans have never been great luxury spenders. We've been wealthy, but we don't necessarily spend and show our wealth. But in other sectors, it's lower and higher, so it really depends. It's hard to give a sort of a blanket answer on that, because it's so volatile.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Great. Have some coffee. Thank you very much.